ruthless director thought he could get away with mistreating a horse behind the scenes of a movie set, confident that no one would call him out. What he didn't realize was that Keanu Reeves was watching, and unlike the rest of the crew, Keanu was not the kind of man to stay silent. As Keanu's car glided through the quiet roads of Santa Clarita, the hum of the engine contrasted sharply with the stillness of the countryside. His destination loomed ahead, a large, industrial building disrupting the natural beauty around it. Pulling into the gravel lot, he read the faded sign above the entrance, Willow Creek Storage Facility. Its chipped paint was a ghostly reminder of a past long forgotten. Stepping out, the crunch of gravel under his boots broke the silence. Keanu scanned his surroundings, scattered wooden pallets, rusting equipment, the telltale signs of a makeshift production set operating in secrecy. Inside, the cavernous space stretched endlessly, its high ceilings lined with hanging industrial lights. Black-draped plywood walls carved out temporary film sets, green screens transforming parts of the warehouse into different worlds. The air buzzed with the energy of a working set, but Keanu's sharp gaze quickly locked onto a familiar face, Elliot Grayson. In the center of the chaos, Elliot stood engaged in an intense conversation with a frazzled production assistant. Even from a distance, Keanu could see the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and for a brief moment, her professional mask slipped. Relief and something close to warmth flickered across her face. Excusing herself, she navigated through the maze of equipment with practiced ease. "Keanu," she called, her voice carrying a mix of excitement and gratitude. "You made it." Their handshake turned into a quick, affectionate hug before she leaned in, dropping her voice to a whisper. "Thank you for being here. For doing this, for me. I know working with Martin Langston isn't easy for you, given your history, but it means more than you know." Keanu gave her a reassuring smile. "Don't mention it, Elliot. You know I'd do anything for you. We've made great films together before, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we can create here." Yet, despite the warm reunion, Keanu could sense an underlying tension in Elliot's posture. Something else was going on, and he had a feeling he was about to find out what. As the set buzzed around them, Elliot gently took his arm, guiding him toward a quieter corner of the warehouse. Her eyes darted around, making sure no one else was within earshot. Resting against a stack of equipment cases, she let out a breath. "Keanu, there's something you should know." Her voice was just above a whisper, her expression unreadable. "I'm not just acting in this movie, I'm co-producing it. And I have a private investor backing me." Keanu raised an eyebrow but stayed silent, letting her continue. "We're planning to announce it in 4 weeks," she explained, running a hand through her hair, a nervous habit Keanu had seen before. "For now, it's a secret. That's why today's shoot is so crucial. My co-producer is extremely particular about the footage we're capturing." Keanu nodded slowly, piecing it together. This wasn't just another job for Elliot, this was personal. "I appreciate you telling me," he said, his voice low and steady. "I'll give it everything I've got. I know what's at stake." A flicker of relief crossed Elliot's face, but her concern quickly returned as Keanu added, "Sorry for being late. I hope it didn't cause issues with Martin." At the mention of the director's name, Elliot's expression tightened. She hesitated before responding. "About that. I know you and Martin have history. Are you sure you're okay working with him? I wouldn't have asked if I had any other option, but..." Keanu took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "I don't hold grudges over the past," he said, though the tension in his jaw suggested otherwise. "But let's be real, Elliot, the man is not easy to work with." And he had no idea just how difficult things were about to get. Keanu met Elliot's gaze, his voice steady with conviction. "I assure you, I'm fully committed to giving my best performance. This project clearly means a lot to you, and I'm here to support that." Elliot let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Reaching out, she gave Keanu's arm a grateful squeeze, her relief almost palpable. "Thank you, Keanu. I know you'll give it everything you've got." Your professionalism is one of the reasons I was so eager to have you on board. With the air somewhat cleared, Elliot led Keanu toward the makeshift preparation area in the back corner of the massive hall. As they walked, she filled him in on the production's finer details, her voice low yet animated, outlining both the challenges and unique opportunities their unconventional shooting location presented. The prep area was a hive of controlled chaos, makeup artists and costume designers working efficiently in the limited space, each movement purposeful. Elliot explained that Martin Langston and the main crew were wrapping up a studio shoot before joining them for Keanu's scenes with the horse. Keanu nodded as he settled into a chair. "I'm looking forward to meeting the horse," he commented while a makeup artist began working on him. The process was quick, minimal, just enough to maintain continuity without unnecessary fuss. Elliot lingered nearby, her presence steady amid the flurry of activity. Despite the charged atmosphere, the familiar mix of excitement and tension that always preceded an important shoot, Keanu found his mind drifting back to the last time he had worked with Martin Langston. Their collaboration had ended in a heated argument, the kind that left a mark. Martin's obsession with perfection had often crossed the line into outright tyranny, his treatment of the crew bordering on abusive. Keanu had been one of the few willing to stand up to him, a confrontation that had led to a lasting rift between them. Now, years later, he wondered, had time softened Martin's hard edges, or would he find the director unchanged? Either way, Keanu was prepared. He had no intention of letting personal history interfere with his professionalism. As the afternoon stretched on, Keanu was led outside to the back of the warehouse. The transition from the cool, dimly lit interior to the sun-drenched outdoors was jarring, and he blinked against the brightness. Before him lay a small fenced enclosure where a magnificent brown horse stood, drinking from a trough. Sunlight gleamed off her sleek coat, muscles rippling beneath her skin with every subtle movement. Keanu didn't need to ask. This was Stella, his equine co-star for the upcoming scenes. Two men stood nearby, watching over the horse with attentive eyes. As Keanu approached, one of them stepped forward, extending his hand with a warm smile. "Mr. Reeves," the man greeted. "I'm Berto, the animal caregiver for the production. It's a pleasure to meet you." He gestured to his companion, a younger man with a weathered face that spoke of long hours spent under the sun. "And this is Rel, a representative from the farm we rented Stella from." Keanu shook hands with both men, though his attention kept drifting back to Stella. There was something regal about her, a quiet dignity, a presence that commanded respect. Drawing from his experience working with horses both on and off set, Keanu approached her with deliberate slowness. His body language was open, non-threatening, every step measured with purpose. He knew better than to rush this moment. Horses were perceptive creatures, and their first interaction would lay the foundation for trust, something crucial for their on-screen partnership. Berto, observing Keanu's approach, pulled a small bag from his pocket. "We brought some treats for you to give her," he said, handing Keanu a few carrot sticks and apple slices. "It's a good way to break the ice, so to speak." Keanu accepted the offering with a nod, his focus locked onto Stella as he closed the remaining distance. His voice dropped to a soft murmur, meant only for her. "Hey there, beautiful." Stella's ears perked at the sound, her deep brown eyes locking onto his with intelligent curiosity. "We're going to be working together today," Keanu continued, his tone gentle, reassuring. "I hope we can be friends." Holding out a carrot, palm flat, he let Stella make the choice to accept it. For a brief moment, she hesitated, nostrils flaring as she caught the scent of the treat. Then, with delicate precision, she took it from his hand. As she crunched on the carrot, Keanu kept speaking in hushed tones, letting her grow accustomed to his voice, his presence. Some might find it odd to talk to a horse this way, but Keanu understood the importance of connection. This wasn't just about a scene, this was about trust. The moment was peaceful, a stark contrast to the hectic energy inside the warehouse. A rare pocket of calm. As Keanu stroked Stella's velvety muzzle, offering her an apple slice, a small smile crossed his lips. But the tranquility shattered in an instant. The atmosphere shifted. A presence entered the space, heavy and unmistakable. Martin Langston had arrived. The atmosphere shifted, a subtle tension creeping into the air. Keanu felt Stella stiffen slightly beneath his hand, her body picking up on the unspoken shift in energy. "Ah, Keanu." The voice was overly jovial, forced. Keanu turned, keeping a steadying hand on Stella's neck, not just to comfort her, but to ground himself as well. Martin Langston strode toward them, his smile practiced but hollow. A man in his late 50s, his salt and pepper hair was neatly styled, his tan skin the kind that came from golf courses, not grueling film sets. "I see you've met our star," he said, nodding toward Stella. Keanu held his gaze, his expression polite but unreadable. "Martin." The director's smile widened, though it never quite reached his eyes. "I wanted to clear the air between us. Water under the bridge, right?" The words were rehearsed, empty. Before Keanu could respond, Martin clapped his hands together, impatience flickering through his carefully controlled demeanor. "But enough of that, daylight's burning, and we need to start filming. We're on a tight schedule." Keanu nodded, reading between the lines. "Of course. Where are we shooting?" "Willow Creek Farm," Martin gestured vaguely toward the horizon. "It's about a 10-minute walk from here. The crew is already setting up." As production assistants scrambled to load equipment into trucks, an idea struck Keanu. He glanced at Stella, then back at Martin. Instead of loading her into the trailer, Keanu suggested, "Why don't I ride her to the farm? It'll save time, and she'll get more comfortable with me before we start shooting." The reaction was immediate. Martin barely concealed an eye roll, muttering something under his breath before catching himself. He plastered on a thin smile. "This is not a recreation, Keanu." Keanu, unfazed, met his gaze evenly. "It'll help us bond. That way, when we start filming, she'll already be relaxed. It could actually save us time in the long run." Martin exhaled sharply, clearly wrestling with the idea before finally waving a dismissive hand. "Do whatever you think is best." Without another word, he turned and climbed into one of the vans, leaving the decision in Keanu's hands. As the production team pulled away toward the farm, Keanu turned back to Stella, his voice soft. "What do you say, girl? Feel like taking a ride?" Stella nickered gently, accepting another apple slice from his hand. Keanu took it as a sign and, with Rel's assistance, prepared to mount. As he settled into the saddle, he couldn't shake the feeling that this simple decision might set something much bigger into motion. The sun hung high, casting golden light across the rolling fields as Keanu guided Stella along the path to Willow Creek Farm. The rhythmic clip-clop of her hooves against the packed earth was soothing, a stark contrast to the organized chaos that greeted them upon arrival. The production team had only just beaten them there, but already the set buzzed with energy, crew members adjusting lights, positioning cameras, setting down dolly tracks for smooth shots. Excited chatter mixed with sharp commands as the final touches were put in place. Keanu swung off Stella's back, patting her neck fondly. "See you on set, girl," he murmured before handing her reins to Rel. The handler nodded, leading Stella away to prepare for filming. Turning back toward the commotion, Keanu spotted Martin standing in the midst of it all, barking orders at a flustered camera operator. The moment the director caught sight of him, he waved him over impatiently, barely pausing his tirade. "Keanu, there you are." Martin's voice was clipped, all business. "We've found the perfect spot for the scene. The light is incredible, but we're racing against time. Get to makeup, we start as soon as possible." Keanu nodded and headed toward the makeshift makeup area under the shade of a sprawling oak tree. As a makeup artist worked quickly to touch up his appearance, he listened to the buzz of conversation around him, piecing together details of the scene. The story, as he understood it, required him to rescue Stella from smugglers and navigate dangerous terrain to deliver a critical message to resistance fighters. A sequence demanding both intense physicality and emotional weight. Exactly the kind of challenge Keanu thrived on. As the final touches were applied, he closed his eyes briefly, centering himself. Years of experience had taught him how to prepare for scenes like this, physically, mentally. The first takes went smoothly. Years of working with horses had given Keanu an ease in the saddle, and the camera captured that natural connection as he and Stella moved through the golden fields. The light was perfect, the wind just right, lending a cinematic magic to every frame. Martin, watching the footage from a nearby monitor, nodded begrudgingly. Good. Good. For now, at least, things were going according to plan. But Keanu had a feeling that wouldn't last for long. Martin muttered to himself, barely loud enough for anyone to hear. Let's move on to the more challenging terrain. At first, everything seemed fine. But as they transitioned to scenes involving gravel and loose sand, problems began to emerge. Stella, who had been cooperative up to this point, suddenly grew restless. She shied away from certain areas, her steps hesitant, forcing Keanu to make constant adjustments just to keep her on mark. Cut. Martin's voice rang out for what felt like the 100th time. Frustration dripped from every syllable as he stormed toward Keanu and Stella, his irritation barely concealed. What's the problem? He demanded, arms spread wide. You said you could handle this horse. Keanu dismounted, his brow furrowed, his hand instinctively running down Stella's neck. Beneath his fingers, he could feel the tension in her muscles. Something's not right, he said, his voice calm but firm. She's acting skittish. This isn't normal behavior for a well-trained horse. As if to confirm his words, Stella suddenly reared up, a distressed whinny ripping through the air. Keanu barely managed to dodge her flailing hooves, his heart pounding at the realization of how close he had come to being thrown. That was enough. That's it, Keanu declared, his tone leaving no room for argument. We need to stop and figure out what's wrong. This isn't safe, not for me, not for the crew, and definitely not for her. The set fell into an uneasy silence. Every eye was now locked on the confrontation unfolding between the star and the director. Martin's jaw tightened, his frustration clear. But even he couldn't ignore what had just happened. After a tense pause, he threw up his hands in exasperation. Fine, he snapped. But make it quick. We can't afford delays. Keanu barely acknowledged him, already turning his attention back to Stella. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed Rel and a few of the farm staff standing nearby, concern written all over their faces. Can you take a look at her? Keanu asked, directing his words to the handlers. You know her best. Maybe you can figure out what's wrong. Before anyone could respond, Martin cut in sharply. No, 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 he barked, shaking his head. We're not leaving this to stable hands. We're taking her back to the warehouse. Our private vet will check her there. Keanu frowned. Moving her if she's in distress might make things worse. Why not bring the vet here? It'd be less stressful for Stella, and we could resume filming faster. Martin's eyes flashed with irritation, his patience worn thin. I'm the director, he snapped, his voice rising. I make the calls. The horse is fine to walk. We're going back. Now. Tension crackled in the air. Crew members exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of whether to step in or stay silent. And then, Martin. Elliot's voice cut through the standoff like a blade. She had been standing back, observing, but now there was steel in her tone. I appreciate how invested you are in Stella's care, she said smoothly, but given her condition, it makes sense to leave this to the farm staff. We can continue with other scenes while they check her out. Martin's jaw clenched at the challenge, his irritation barely masked. No, he insisted, his voice taut with barely contained frustration. I want to hear from the vet myself. This animal has already cost us enough time. If I'm spending budget on her, I want to know exactly what's going on. Silence stretched between them, thick with tension. Keanu glanced at Elliot, catching the worry flickering behind her composed expression. He wanted to push back, to insist on doing what was best for Stella, but the memory of past conflicts with Martin made him pause. If he pushed too hard, This could escalate into something bigger, something that could put the entire production at risk. And he wasn't willing to jeopardize this project for Elliot. With a slow, measured breath, Keanu gave a small nod. "All right," he said, his voice steady despite the concern gnawing at him. "Let's head back to the warehouse. You, me, and Rel. The rest of the crew can stay and keep setting up. We'll continue filming once we know Stella's okay." Martin's lips pressed into a thin line, but he didn't argue. With a sharp clap of his hands, he called for a 30-minute break, sending the crew into motion. As equipment was packed away and people scattered to rest, Keanu stayed by Stella's side, his hand resting gently on her neck. Something was wrong. And as much as he hated to admit it, he had a sinking feeling that heading back to the warehouse was about to change everything. The ride back was tense and silent. Keanu sat in the transport vehicle with Stella, his palm resting against her side as she shifted uneasily with every jolt in the road. Her muscles twitched beneath his hand, her anxiety evident. Something was wrong. He could feel it. When they finally pulled into the gravel lot of the warehouse, Martin was the first to leap out of the lead vehicle, impatience radiating from every sharp movement. Without waiting for anyone, he strode toward the warehouse entrance, his focus locked on whatever came next. Keanu, however, moved with more care. Stepping out, he turned to Stella, murmuring soft reassurances as he gently guided her from the transport. Whatever was going on with her, it wasn't just a random reaction. And Keanu had a gut feeling that they were about to find out exactly what it was. As they arrived at the warehouse, Dr. Vivian Clark, the production's veterinarian, was already waiting. Her sharp, experienced eyes immediately assessed Stella's condition. "Let's get her inside for a proper examination," she said, her voice calm yet firm. Keanu's concern deepened as he noticed Martin's rough handling of the horse, his grip on the lead rope unnecessarily tight, his tone harsh. Stella flattened her ears in distress, a clear sign of discomfort. Inside, the tension in the room was palpable as Dr. Vivian methodically examined Stella. Her frown deepened with each passing moment. After several minutes, she straightened, her voice edged with concern. "There are multiple injuries, bruises, swelling. This isn't from today. The pattern suggests ongoing mistreatment." A heavy silence fell. Martin, clearly caught off guard, was quick to deflect. "Accidents happen on set. It must have been the stunt actors or repeated takes." Dr. Vivian remained unconvinced but stayed professional. "Regardless, Stella can't continue filming. She needs treatment and rest for weeks." Martin's frustration was obvious, his focus fixed more on the budget than the horse's well-being. "How much is this going to cost?" $5,000 at most, Dr. Vivian estimated. Rel, the farm's representative, stepped in with a solution. "We can provide a replacement horse at no extra charge, and we'll arrange for Stella's rehabilitation." Martin, exasperated, dismissed the idea of sending Stella back to the farm. "She stays here. I want my vet to assess her fully." But before anyone could move her, Stella balked, growing more agitated. Keanu, keeping his voice level, suggested, "Let's keep her inside where it's cooler." Martin bristled. "Have you lost your mind? That horse could damage our equipment." Keanu's patience was wearing thin. "It was your decision to bring her here, Martin. We could have had the vet come to the farm instead." Martin hesitated, his face flushing red. Then, with forced nonchalance, he muttered, "I need the restroom." "Just do whatever. But if anything gets damaged, Keanu, you're paying for it." The moment Martin was out of sight, Keanu and the team carefully moved Stella into a cooler, more comfortable space. Almost instantly, she relaxed. Rel and Berto quickly assembled a makeshift stable with fresh straw. As Stella settled, Keanu's gaze landed on a forgotten camera among the film equipment. An idea struck him. Quietly, he powered it on, ensuring it captured the area where Stella rested. If something suspicious happened, they'd have proof. Martin returned, his frustration barely contained. "Enough of this. We need a new horse." Keanu, Rel, get to the farm now. As they walked, Martin ranted about the inconvenience of animals in filmmaking. They're unpredictable, unreliable. If it weren't for the script, I'd cut them entirely. Keanu stayed silent but took note. Something felt deeply off. Halfway to the farm, Martin suddenly stopped. I need the restroom again. You two go ahead. Keanu and Rel continued, but unease gnawed him. Too much time passed. When his calls to Martin went unanswered, Keanu decided to head back alone. Inside the warehouse, he found Dr. Vivian and Berto. Have you seen Martin? They shook their heads. No, but Keanu, Dr. Vivian hesitated. I found signs of malnourishment in Stella. This didn't happen at the farm. It must have started here. Keanu's unease solidified into certainty. Something was very, very wrong. Then he heard it, Martin's voice, echoing from the main hall. Anger. Insults. Keanu moved closer. And what he saw made his blood run cold. Martin stood over Stella, his foot pressed against the sedated horse's head, forcing her down. For a moment, time froze. Then, Martin sensed him. Their eyes met. Panic flickered across the director's face. Keanu, this isn't, I was just checking on her. Keanu stepped forward, his voice low and steady, rage burning beneath the surface. I saw what you were doing, Martin. I heard you. Martin snapped. Do you have any idea how much this animal is costing me? It's ruining everything. Keanu didn't argue. Instead, he pulled out his phone and dialed 911. Martin's face drained of color. You can't do this. No one will believe you over me. I'm the director. Keanu ignored him, calmly relaying the situation. Minutes later, sirens wailed in the distance. Martin bolted toward the parking lot, desperate to intercept the officers. But Keanu was right behind him. Two police cruisers pulled up, lights flashing red and blue. Martin reached them first, launching into a frantic, convoluted lie. This man, he's trying to sabotage my film. He has a grudge against me. The officers listened, unreadable. Then they turned to Keanu. Sir, what's your side? Keanu simply gestured toward the warehouse. I have footage. Martin's face crumpled. Inside, an officer examined the camera Keanu had set up. Moments later, he confirmed, the footage is clear. We're taking this as evidence. Reality sank in. Martin's desperation morphed into rage. You think this will ruin me? I'll ruin you. You'll never work in Hollywood again. The officers restrained him, reading his rights. His threats rang hollow now. As Martin was led away, Dr. Vivian and Berto stood stunned. I knew something was wrong, Dr. Vivian murmured. But I never imagined it was this bad. Berto stroked Stella's neck. She must have been terrified. Keanu's phone rang. Elliot. Keanu, what's going on? We heard sirens. He explained everything. She gasped. I'm coming over. By the time Elliot arrived, the warehouse felt less like a film set and more like a crime scene. Police took statements. Crew members whispered in shock. The future of the movie hung in limbo. But Keanu wasn't thinking about that. He was thinking about Stella. Dr. Vivian confirmed her injuries were worse than they thought. She'll need long-term rehabilitation. Keanu didn't hesitate. I'll cover it. Elliot's eyes widened. Keanu, you don't have to. I want to. As Stella was loaded into the transport trailer to return to the farm, Keanu stroked her muzzle one last time. You're going to be okay, girl. You're safe now. She nickered softly in response. Later that night, at Willow Creek Farm, Keanu watched Stella settle into her new stable. The trauma wouldn't fade overnight, but she was surrounded by people who cared. She would heal. As he gently brushed her mane, he whispered, "We'll get through this together." Because this wasn't the end. It was a new beginning.